The Islamist terrorist group's successful conquest of the capital marks the end of the Taliban's complete control of the country. The Taliban has increased its efforts to seize control of Afghanistan since last year's accord between the Taliban and the U.S., in which then-President Donald Trump committed to a comprehensive withdrawal of U.S. combat forces. Last week, as the August 31st deadline for the U.S. Army's withdrawal approached, the Taliban began a rapid seizure of outposts, villages, and cities, reaching all the way to Kabul. Images of frightened Afghans thronging the tarmac at Kabul's international airport this week astonished the globe, as they grasped at their last chance to exit a country now completely under Taliban authority. The topic has been raised by Americans, Afghans, military veterans, and international observers, and the answer, like the Afghanistan war itself, is subtle, deep, and painful. Intelligence failures, a stronger Taliban, corruption, money, cultural differences, and a lack of basic willpower, according to observers, are among the key culprits. According to Jack Wuttling, a research fellow for ground warfare and military sciences at the Royal United Services Institute in London, the Taliban did not have to fight its way into Afghanistan's provincial capitals. Instead, the Taliban arranged for a sequence of surrenders to take place. Many Afghan soldiers surrendered after making gains in cities, assuming that the government in Kabul would not assist them. The Taliban would infiltrate cities, assassinating key figures such as pilots and threatening leaders' families, suggesting that if you surrender, your family will be saved, Wuttling continued. On Monday, the president defended his decision to leave Afghanistan, blaming it entirely on the Afghan government. Biden stated, "American troops cannot and should not die in a war that Afghan forces are reluctant to fight for themselves." On Sunday, the Taliban achieved their final objective, taking Kabul's presidential palace. They are both militarily and non-militarily connected in their pursuit of the same goal: the establishment of an Islamic emirate in Afghanistan. The Taliban have ringed Kabul, cut off crucial supply routes for government forces, and increased their numbers as they devise new strategies. The Taliban also outsource decision-making to ground commanders and dispatches individuals into conquered regions to provide residents with small-scale social services. This has allowed the organization to outmaneuver Afghan and international forces in terms of effectively appealing to, co-opting, or coercing the local community to support or not oppose them. If the Taliban had launched a full military attack and faced opposition, the shelling of the country would have taken longer, but Wuttling believes it would still have happened. And we're not well directed, Wuttling said, and we're not well directed. Grasp understanding America's failure in Afghanistan also necessitates a knowledge of the country's history and culture, as well as how distinct they are from those of any Western country. Afghanistan is a country with various tribes, dialects, ethnic groupings, and religious sects, and Washington and its NATO allies were attempting to transform it into a unified democracy based mostly on Western values. There was a basic failure to comprehend what the Afghans desired, Zakia, who trained an Iraqi unit in 2004, said. The Taliban's strength was bolstered by the fact that they were Pashtuns, Afghanistan's largest ethnic group. "I have no regrets about what I did in Afghanistan." The former Marine condition of anonymity since his employment prohibits him from speaking to the press.
"I always promised the American people that I would be straight with you. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight. If anything, the developments of the past week reinforced that ending U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan now was the right decision.
The most fearsome sight, bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. On August 6 and 9, 1945, the United States dropped 2 nuclear bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The 2 attacks killed between 129,000 and 226,000 people, the most of whom were civilians, and they remain the only wartime use of nuclear weapons. The Allies planned an expensive invasion of the Japanese mainland in the final year of World War II. Before being flown to Tinian, Mariana Islands, the U.S. Army Air Force's 509th Composite Group was trained and equipped with the unique silver plate version of the Boeing B-29 Super Fortress. In the Potsdam Declaration of July 26, 1945, the Allies requested unconditional surrender of Imperial Japanese military forces, with immediate and absolute annihilation as the alternative. The United Kingdom agreed to the bombing, as required under the Quebec Agreement, and instructions were given on July 25 for atomic bombs to be dropped on Hiroshima, Kokura, Niigata, and Nagasaki. On August 6, when a little boy was dropped on Hiroshima, Prime Minister Suzuki confirmed the Japanese government's readiness to ignore the Allies' orders and fight on. During the next 2 to 4 months, the atomic bombs killed between 90,000 and 146,000 people in Hiroshima and 39,000 and 80,000 people in Nagasaki, with approximately half of the deaths occurring on the first day. Burns, radiation sickness, and injuries, which were aggravated by illness and malnutrition, killed a large number of victims months later. Japan surrendered to the Allies on August 15, 6 days after the Soviet Union declared war and destroyed Nagasaki. The Japanese government signed the document of surrender on September 2, effectively ending the war. Supporters argue that the atomic bombings were required to bring the war to a quick end with few casualties, while critics argue that the Japanese government could have been persuaded to surrender through other means, citing the moral and ethical implications of nuclear weapons as well as civilian deaths. The Japanese people's position deteriorated as the Allies marched nearer Japan. Because of Japan's geography, the Japanese were able to properly foresee the Allied invasion plans and alter their defense plan, Operation Kitsug, appropriately. The assessment criticized Japan's weak fortifications as a result of the highly effective naval blockade and American firebombing campaign after learning from the Battle of Okinawa. In January 1945, Hansel's replacement, Major General Curtis LeMay, took charge and proceeded to use the same precision bombing techniques, with similarly poor results. During the next 6 months, the XXI Bomber Command, led by LeMay, bombed 67 Japanese cities. Tokyo's firebombing, codenamed Operation Meeting House, killed an estimated 100,000 people and destroyed 16 square miles, 41 square kilometers, of the city and 267,000 buildings in a single night. The Japanese military was unable to repel the Allied assaults, and civil defensive measures were determined to be insufficient. In April 1945, Marshall asked Groves to recommend specific bombing targets for Marshall and Stimson's final approval. On April 27, the Target Committee met in Washington. On May 10, it met in Los Alamos, where it had the opportunity to speak with scientists and technicians, and on May 28, it met in Washington, where it was briefed by Project Albertus Tibbets and Commander Frederick Ashworth, as well as the Manhattan Project's scientific advisor, Richard C. The Target Committee identified 5 objectives. Kokura is home to one of Japan's most important weapons plants, now Kitakyushu. Yokohama is recognized for its aircraft manufacture, machine tools, docks, electrical equipment, and oil refineries. Hiroshima is an embarkation port and industrial city that also served as the location of a major military command. Niigata is a port with a strong industrial presence. The Army Air Forces agreed to leave these cities off the target list in order to precisely study the damage inflicted by the atomic bombs, hence they were generally spared during the nightly bombing operations. There are 2 parts to this: 1, causing the most psychological damage to Japan, and 2, making the initial deployment spectacular enough for the weapon's significance to be recognized internationally when publicity about it is released. Hiroshima has the advantage of being a huge city with the possibility for a large area of the city to be devastated as a result of likely concentration from nearby mountains. Even if a bomb was dropped in Japan without warning, Japanese Air Force would be sufficient to cause considerable disruption. A bungled move by the Japanese defenders during the final adjustments to the bomb might easily result in failure. It's possible that POW from other countries will be transferred to the demonstration site and killed by the bomb. Aerial bombers wreaked devastation on multiple Japanese cities, obliterating some of them totally. The Interim Committee's scientific panel, led by Oppenheimer, voted against a demonstration bomb and a particular leaflet warning in preparation for delivering an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. We, as the world's leader, cannot fire that terrible bomb on the old capital Kyoto or the new capital Tokyo for the sake of the common good, even though the Japanese are savages, brutal, heartless, and zealots. The declaration functioned as an ultimatum, threatening that unless Japan surrendered, the Allies would attack, resulting in the inevitable and complete destruction of the Japanese military forces, as well as the complete devastation of the Japanese country. Hiroshima's population had peaked at roughly 381,000 people earlier in the war, but it had been steadily declining prior to the atomic assault as a result of the Japanese government's systematic evacuation. The first atomic bombing campaign began on August 6, 1945, with Hiroshima as the primary target and Kokura and Nagasaki as backup targets. The 393D bombardment squadrons B-29 Enola Gay took out from Northfield, Tinian, roughly 6 hours from Japan, named after Tibbets' mother and piloted by Tibbets. Enola Gay was joined by 2 additional B-29s, the instrument-carrying Great Artiste, commanded by Major Charles Sweeney, and the unnamed aircraft afterwards dubbed Necessary Evil, flown by Captain George Marquardt. The planes flew separately from Tinian to Iwo Jima, where they rejoined Sweeney and Marquardt at 5:55 at a height of 9,200 feet, 2,800 meters, and planned a course towards Japan. On the night of August 5 to 6, Japanese early warning radar detected many American aircraft heading for the southern part of Japan. The Enola Gay had been flying above the target area for 2 minutes and was 10 miles away when the bomb detonated. Because of Japan's seismic risk, several of Hiroshima's reinforced concrete structures were intended to be extremely durable, and their framework did not collapse despite being close to the blast center. The force of the bomb, which detonated in the air, was directed downward rather than sideways, allowing the Prefectural Industrial Promotional Hall, now known as the Genbaku, A-bomb, dome, to survive despite being only 150 meters, 490 feet, from ground zero, the hypocenter. In the minutes, hours, and days following the assault, survivors in Hiroshima urgently tried to locate loved ones and care for the thousands of injured. Some people were burned horribly, while others who appeared to be unhurt died of radiation sickness. Thousands of people were buried beneath the rubble of their homes. The majority of the city's structures were built before the war. President Harry Truman was aboard the cruiser USS Augusta on his way back from the Potsdam Conference when he learned of the bomb's successful detonation. He immediately alerted his counselors and the ship's crew. As word went throughout the globe, Allied soldiers all around the world felt as if they had been granted a reprieve from death. The Second World War comes to an end.